Hello, and welcome to Soothing Pod's Sleep Stories. I am Arif, and tonight we will journey through the life of Alexander the Great, from his birth in Macedonia to the vast empire he commanded. Together, we will explore the cities he founded, the lands he governed, and the enduring legacy he left across continents, discovering how one life shaped history for generations to come. Before we begin our journey tonight, let's take time to relax and let go of the stresses of the day. Here and now, there are no obligations, no to-do lists. By simply lying in bed with your eyes closed, you are already giving your body nourishing rest. Breathe in slowly and let the day begin to fade away. The noise of the world, the thoughts that circle restlessly, all begin to settle now, like dust falling through a quiet beam of light. Feel the rhythm of your breath as it softens, unhurried and gentle. Each exhale releases what no longer belongs to this hour. Each inhale invites stillness, spacious and clear. Imagine yourself beneath a vast evening sky. The air is cool and sweet, touched with the faint scent of earth and wind. The horizon glows in fading gold, and above it, the first stars appear, distant, patient, eternal. You stand at the edge of time itself, where every dream and every memory becomes one slow current, flowing toward rest. The heart grows lighter, the mind grows wide. Here, you do not need to strive or reach, only to be. The world moves gently around you, and you are part of it, calm, ancient, infinite. Let the silence between breaths stretch wider now, until it becomes a quiet sea. Drift upon it, effortless, weightless. The night holds you as it once held kings and wanderers, poets and dreamers, each pausing to listen to the hush between the stars. In this stillness, there are no beginnings and no endings, only the peace of being carried endlessly toward light. Now that we have taken a moment to relax and find peace and comfort in the place that we are in, let us begin our story. In the quiet hills of Macedonia, where morning mist hovered over olive groves and the pale rivers reflected the awakening sky, a child was born under a summer moon. It was the 20th or 21st of July, 356 BC, in the city of Pella, the heart of a kingdom poised between the mountains of Greece and the vast lands beyond. The boy was Alexander, son of King Philip II and Queen Olympias, destined for a name that would travel through the centuries. From the very beginning, his arrival seemed touched by the extraordinary. That same night, the temple of Artemis at Ephesus burned, a blaze that would later be remembered as an omen. Olympias, the queen, dreamed of serpents coiling around her child and whispers of gods in the night wind, Philip, ever the ruler, observed the boy with a cautious reverence, aware that history often chose its champions quietly, in small moments before the world noticed. Alexander's earliest years were filled with both wonder and expectation. The city of Pella thrummed with life, merchants trading goods from distant lands, poets reciting stories of heroes, and the soft, steady rhythm of Macedonian life in the hills and fields. Amid this, Alexander wandered freely, observing the patterns of birds as they wheeled over the hills, listening to the murmur of the rivers, and noticing the shapes of clouds that drifted above the mountains. Even as a child, he seemed to notice details others overlooked. The way a tree bent toward the sun, the cadence of a bird's song, the faint tracks of animals in the soil. The young prince was not shielded from responsibility. Philip expected him to understand the weight of his lineage, the duties that came with being the heir of Macedon. Yet, his mother's devotion provided a different kind of guidance, one of faith and vision. Olympias spoke to him of destiny and greatness, of the potential for a single life to leave an indelible mark on the world. In her eyes, the boy was already extraordinary, a thread connecting the mortal and the divine. Even as he played in the golden fields outside Pella, Alexander displayed qualities that hinted at the man he would become. His mind was alert, his eyes sharp, and his curiosity insatiable. He tested himself and those around him with gentle challenges, learning through observation, reflection, and careful action. When faced with difficulty, he showed patience rather than impatience, thoughtfulness rather than rashness. One story of his youth carried particular meaning for those who watched him grow. The boy tamed Bucephalus, a horse larger and wilder than any in Macedonia. Many adults had tried and failed, but Alexander approached the challenge differently. He observed the animal's fear and hesitation, patiently gaining its trust. When he finally mounted, the bond was instant and complete. The lesson was quiet yet profound. Leadership required understanding, empathy, and courage, qualities that would guide him far beyond the hills of Macedonia. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the city, Alexander often paused to gaze at the horizon. The world beyond the hills seemed infinite, full of mysteries and possibilities. Though still a boy, he carried a sense that his life was not ordinary, that the paths he would walk would stretch far and wide. And so, beneath the early skies of Macedonia, a dream began to take shape, a quiet, powerful vision of a life destined to leave a mark that would echo through history. As the years passed in the gentle hills and golden plains of Macedonia, Alexander grew taller, stronger, and more aware of the world around him. The boy who had once wandered the rivers and watched the flight of birds now began to grasp the shape of human knowledge itself. His curiosity deepened, and with it came the guidance of one of the greatest thinkers of the time. At the age of 13, Alexander was placed under the tutelage of Aristotle, the philosopher whose wisdom spanned the heavens and the earth. In the shaded groves of Mieza, among olive trees and soft, rustling grass, Aristotle spoke of ethics, politics, and the natural world. His voice was calm and deliberate, inviting Alexander to wonder rather than command, to question rather than accept blindly. Under this gentle guidance, Alexander learned to read the patterns of stars and the courses of rivers, to study plants and animals, to consider the ways people governed themselves and the laws that bound them together. Aristotle encouraged him not only to acquire knowledge, but to understand its purpose, how learning could illuminate action, and how reflection could guide decision. Alexander absorbed these lessons with a quiet intensity, his mind a sponge for ideas, philosophies, and observations from every corner of human thought. Beyond the lessons of philosophy, Alexander's education nurtured his natural leadership. He studied the principles of justice, the responsibilities of rulers, and the importance of balance between ambition and restraint. He was encouraged to debate, to listen carefully, and to consider perspectives beyond his own. In these exercises, he discovered patience, discernment, and the subtle power of persuasion. Even in moments of leisure, Alexander's mind remained active. He read poetry and history, listened to the accounts of travelers and scholars, and asked questions about lands far beyond Macedonia. Tales of Egypt, Persia, and the distant East fascinated him, foreseeing the threads that connected one people to another, one culture to another. His world grew wider with every lesson, every story, every observation. His training in writing, military exercises, and observation of leadership in action had instilled discipline, focus, and determination. The bond with Bucephalus endured, a reminder of the patience and skill required to master both horse and challenge. These years of rigorous learning and preparation shaped a young man capable of commanding men, organizing campaigns, and taking responsibility for a kingdom. In the open fields and wooded paths around Mieza, Alexander's education extended beyond books. He learned strategy, history, and governance, observing the landscapes, the rivers, and the cities of Macedonia. His curiosity and study prepared him to lead, plan, and make decisions in the complex world of kingship. By the time he approached adulthood, the foundations were in place for a ruler ready to assume the crown. with the training, knowledge, and experience necessary to guide Macedonia into the years ahead. In 336 BC, following the assassination of his father, Philip II, Alexander ascended to the throne of Macedonia at the age of 20. The kingdom he inherited was strong, but surrounded by potential threats, and the Greek city-states remained divided in their loyalties. As the new king, Alexander acted swiftly to consolidate his authority, demonstrating decisiveness that would mark the early years of his reign. He moved to secure the allegiance of the Macedonian army, reaffirmed the loyalty of the Greek allies, and neutralized any rival claims to power that could have undermined his rule. Alexander's first priority as king was stability. He understood that inherited power alone would not be enough to maintain control over Macedonia and the broader Greek territories allied to his father. He strengthened the army, organizing troops and appointing commanders capable of both loyalty and effectiveness. Supplies, equipment, and logistics were carefully managed, ensuring that Macedonia was prepared for both defense and the campaigns that lay ahead. His leadership combined inherited authority with practical measures, demonstrating that command was both inherited and earned through competence. From his base in Pella, the administrative and political center of Macedonia, Alexander coordinated these early actions. Pella was a hub of activity. The palace saw the coming and going of envoys from city-states. Plans were drawn for the administration of conquered territories, and the streets and markets reflected a kingdom that was alive with purpose. The young king had little time for leisure. The responsibilities of leadership demanded constant attention to military readiness, diplomacy, and governance. While Macedonia was secure under his early actions, Alexander's ambitions extended beyond the kingdom he inherited. Philip II had laid the groundwork for a campaign against the Persian Empire, and Alexander immediately began preparing for this venture. He studied maps, assessed the resources of the empire he would soon confront, and consulted with his generals to understand the strategies necessary for success. Each decision reflected both practicality and ambition, organizing supplies, fortifying garrisons, and coordinating with allied Greek city-states who would follow him into new territories. Alexander's approach to leadership was methodical. He combined inherited knowledge with observations gained from his childhood education and early experiences. While still a young man, he already demonstrated the organizational skill and strategic planning that would allow him to lead vast armies and govern extensive territories. His preparation during these first months as king laid the foundation for the campaigns that would eventually carry him across Asia and into Egypt, Persia, and beyond. By the end of his first year as king, Macedonia was firmly under his control. The Greek allies were aligned with his command, and the army was organized for action. Alexander's authority was no longer just symbolic. It was practical, disciplined, and capable of sustaining the ambitions he had inherited and set for himself. The responsibilities of leadership, the preparation for expansion, and the coordination of allies and resources marked the transition from prince to king, from heir to the active architect of an empire. Even in these early stages, Alexander's vision was ambitious. He now stood at the threshold of campaigns that would test his ability to command, organize, and strategize across unfamiliar lands. The experiences of these first months as king were formative. He learned the weight of authority, the importance of decisive action, and the necessity of careful planning in both war and governance. The young king who once trained with generals and tamed his first horse now faced the enormous task of leading men and nations. From Pella, the streets and halls that had witnessed his youth now echoed with the responsibilities of kingship. The foundations of Macedonia's future expansion were being laid as the young king prepared to embark on a course that would carry him far beyond his homeland. Every decision, every order, and every alliance was a step toward the campaigns that would define Alexander's life and leave a legacy that would be remembered for centuries. After securing his position as King of Macedonia and confirming the loyalty of the Greek allies, Alexander began to carry out the plans his father had set in motion. His ambition was clear: to expand Macedonian influence eastward and confront the Persian Empire. With careful preparation, he organized his army, appointed commanders, and ensured that supplies and logistics were in place. His leadership in these early campaigns combined inherited authority with practical measures to maintain cohesion among troops and allies. Alexander led his forces through Thrace and into Asia Minor, moving from city to city, crossing rivers, and navigating unfamiliar terrain. Along the way, he maintained order among the populations he passed, respecting local customs when it was strategically advantageous and incorporating regional leaders into his administration. He did not invent governance in these lands. He adapted existing structures to serve the needs of his expanding empire. This approach allowed him to maintain control over conquered territories while preparing for further advancement. One of the most notable stops on this journey was Egypt. Alexander arrived to a land steeped in history, where the people recognized his authority and he was welcomed as a ruler. Here he founded Alexandria, planning the city as a center of administration, trade, and culture. The city's location on the Mediterranean coast made it an ideal hub for communication and commerce, and Alexander appointed administrators to oversee its initial development. Alexandria was intended to be a lasting foundation, connecting the local population with the wider Hellenistic world through governance and commerce. Beyond Egypt, Alexander moved into the heart of the Persian Empire. He passed through major cities and river valleys, observing the systems of governance and trade that had flourished for centuries. His campaigns were successful in terms of military strategy. He remained undefeated, a testament to the discipline, planning, and coordination that characterized his leadership. Though battles were fought, the focus here is on the practical outcomes, the integration of territories, the appointment of officials, and the organization of resources to maintain control over the lands he now commanded. Alexander also established new settlements and reorganized existing towns at strategic locations, ensuring that the infrastructure of his empire could support both military and civil administration. These foundations were not merely symbolic. They served as centers for governance, trade, and communication, helping to connect distant regions under his authority. At the same time, he continued to learn from local scholars, engineers, and administrators, observing geography, customs, and practices that would inform his decisions in governance and urban planning. By the time he had reached Egypt and entered the Persian heartland, Alexander had transformed Macedonia from a regional kingdom into a base for one of the largest empires in history. His attention to logistics, administration, and city founding allowed him to sustain campaigns across vast and diverse territories. Even as he pressed forward with conquest, he ensured that the territories he commanded were organized, functional, and prepared for further expansion. The foundations laid during these early campaigns would serve as the base for future conquests into Central Asia, parts of South Asia, and northwestern India. Each city founded, each administrative decision, and each settlement reorganized reflected a ruler whose focus was on effective governance and practical outcomes. The young king of Macedonia had become a commander capable of leading men and managing lands on an unprecedented scale, setting the stage for an empire that would stretch from Greece to the edges of India. After consolidating control over Macedonia, the Greek city-states, and Egypt, Alexander turned his attention eastward, prepared to advance deeper into the Persian Empire. With meticulous planning, he organized his army, ensured supplies were in place, and coordinated with his commanders. The Macedonian forces, disciplined and loyal, marched alongside Greek allies whose support Alexander had carefully secured. Each movement of the army required strategy, and each city or region they passed demanded careful attention to administration, resources, and local governance. Alexander's campaign took him through the heart of Persia, where he encountered cities that had governed vast populations for centuries. Major cities like Susa and Persepolis were centers of wealth and culture, and Alexander moved with both authority and practical purpose. Rather than dismantling these cities entirely, he incorporated local officials into his administration, ensuring continuity and stability. The organization of taxation, supplies, and communication networks allowed him to maintain control over these territories even as he moved farther east. The conquest of Persia was not merely military. It also involved extensive observation and adaptation. Alexander noted local engineering, irrigation systems, and governance practices, understanding that effective administration would be essential to manage such diverse regions. He relied on Macedonian and Greek officers, but also drew on the expertise of local administrators, recognizing the practical benefits of integrating experienced officials into his expanding empire. From Persia, Alexander pressed into Central Asia, moving through Bactria and Sogdiana. These regions presented new challenges: rugged terrain, vast deserts, and mountain ranges. The army's movement was carefully planned, with supply lines stretched over great distances and new cities established to secure strategic locations. These settlements served as garrisons, administrative centers, and hubs of communication, ensuring that Alexander could govern territories far from Macedonia. The establishment of these cities also allowed for the introduction of Greek settlers, military personnel, and administrators, creating a lasting imprint of Hellenistic culture and governance in the region. In the northern reaches of the Indian subcontinent, Alexander continued to observe local systems of rule and social organization. Crossing rivers such as the Hydaspes, he coordinated with local leaders to secure passage and manage resources. These interactions were pragmatic. He often retained existing officials, drew upon local knowledge, and organized his own officers to oversee administration. His approach ensured that the army could advance efficiently while the local population remained under structured governance. Alexander's founding of cities was central to his strategy of control. Beyond Alexandria in Egypt, which had already been established as a major port and administrative center, additional cities in Central Asia and along the Indus River were carefully planned. Each settlement served multiple purposes: facilitating trade, supporting military operations, and providing a framework for administration. These cities became lasting markers of his campaigns, demonstrating his ability to combine conquest with practical governance. By the age of 30, Alexander had created one of the largest empires in history, stretching from Greece to northwestern India. He remained undefeated in battle, a factual testament to his strategic skill and the discipline of his forces. But the scope of his achievements extended beyond military success. His organizational skills, city foundations, and attention to administrative detail allowed the vast territories he controlled to function under a cohesive system. Trade routes were maintained, communications organized, and local governance adapted to fit within his overarching framework. Even as his army pressed farther east, Alexander continued to study the lands he ruled, observing rivers, mountains, and cities. He gathered knowledge that informed decisions about settlement, taxation, and administration. He consulted with engineers, scholars, and officials, ensuring that the regions he controlled were both secure and organized. His ability to integrate practical knowledge into the management of a sprawling empire demonstrated the combination of ambition, planning, and leadership that defined his campaigns. By the conclusion of these eastern campaigns, the territories Alexander commanded were connected through a network of cities, roads, and administrative systems. Each region he had passed through retained elements of local governance while being integrated into a larger structure under his authority. His influence extended not only through conquest, but also through practical administration, city planning, and organization of resources. The Macedonian king who had once begun his reign in Pella had now shaped an empire that spanned continents, laying the groundwork for cultural and administrative connections that would endure long after his death. After years of campaigns across Persia, Central Asia, and northwestern India, Alexander returned to Babylon, the administrative and cultural center of his sprawling empire. There, he oversaw the organization of the territories he had brought under his control, attending to the governance of regions stretching from Greece to the Indus. Babylon, already a city of wealth and influence, became the hub from which he managed the administration of provinces, the establishment of new cities, and the coordination of trade routes across his vast holdings. In Babylon, Alexander continued to consolidate his empire. He appointed officials to govern cities and regions, coordinated the movement of resources, and maintained communication with distant territories. His attention to administration ensured that Macedonian and Greek officers worked alongside local leaders to maintain stability. While campaigns had brought lands under his authority, governance required organization, supervision, and planning, tasks he approached with the same strategic focus that had guided his military decisions. Yet Alexander's health began to decline. In 323 BC, at the age of 32, he fell ill in Babylon. Ancient sources describe a fever that worsened over several days, though historians debate its precise cause. Malaria, typhoid, or another disease are possibilities. Despite his illness, he continued to attend to matters of state as long as he was able, showing the persistence and focus that had marked his reign. His passing left the empire without a named successor, creating uncertainty and ultimately leading to the division of his territories among his generals, the Diadochi. Even after his death, Alexander's influence persisted. The cities he had founded, most notably Alexandria in Egypt, became centers of administration, trade, and culture. These urban centers facilitated the movement of goods, people, and ideas across regions that had previously been disconnected. Other settlements he established in Central Asia and along the Indus River served as military, administrative, and economic hubs, creating networks that ensured the continued functioning of his empire long after his passing. The practical organization he had implemented allowed Hellenistic culture to spread widely. Greek language, customs, and administrative practices merged with local traditions, influencing art, architecture, governance, and trade for generations. Scholars, traders, and travelers moved along the routes he had helped secure, exchanging knowledge and connecting distant regions. In this way, the impact of Alexander's life extended far beyond the territories he had directly controlled, shaping civilizations in multiple regions for centuries to come. Alexander's military record remained unmatched. He was undefeated in battle, a testament to careful planning, disciplined execution, and the coordination of vast armies across diverse terrains. Yet his legacy was not only in victories, it was in the networks, cities, and administrative systems he established. His campaigns connected continents, fostered cultural exchange, and created lasting structures that shaped the development of regions from Greece to India. By the end of his life, the young king who had risen from Pella had achieved unprecedented reach. His decisions in administration, city founding, and organization of territories allowed his empire to function as a cohesive system, even in his absence. Although the empire was eventually divided, the structures, cities, and connections he had created continued to influence trade, governance, and culture for centuries. Alexander's life was brief, yet his accomplishments were vast. From his early years in Macedonia to the far reaches of Asia, he transformed the scope of human connection, governance, and cultural exchange. The empire he commanded, though ultimately fragmented, reflected the scale of his achievements, the extent of his ambition, and the practical leadership that had allowed him to unite and manage such diverse lands. his influence persisted, a historical footprint visible in cities, trade routes, and the spread of Hellenistic knowledge long after the final days in Babylon. Even now, thousands of years later, the name Alexander the Great carries a quiet power, and his life remained a point of reference for rulers, scholars, and historians. His achievements were measured not only in the lands he controlled or the battles he won, but in the enduring systems, cities, and networks he established. From the Mediterranean shores of Greece to the rivers of India, his influence shaped trade, culture, and governance for generations. In the silence of Babylon after his passing, the empire he had built carried forward, a testament to the scale of his vision and the practical skill with which he had guided it. Though his life was brief, Alexander's story endures, a reminder of the extraordinary reach of human ambition, organization, and determination. I hope you've enjoyed this sleep story, and it's led you to a night of restful sleep. Please join me again tomorrow for another sleep story. Until then, sweet dreams.